The Tale of Tommy and the Magical Playground. The Fall and the First Tear. The sun was shining high above the magical playground, where everything felt alive with joy. It was no ordinary place. Here, the swings could take you as high as the clouds, and if you really believed, they might even let you touch the stars. The slides twisted and twirled in loops that made you feel like you were riding a dragon's back. Everywhere you looked, something sparkled or shimmered, as if the air itself was made of tiny bits of magic. In the middle of this playground was a little boy named Tommy. He wasn't very tall, and his hair was as messy as a bird's nest after a windy day. Tommy had a big smile that made his eyes squint into little half-moons whenever he was happy, which was almost all the time. He loved running through the playground, jumping from one game to the next, as if there was a great race and he had to try every bit of fun before the day was over. But on this special day, something different happened. Tommy had been running, faster than he usually did, chasing the laughter that bounced around the playground like an invisible ball. His heart was full of excitement, and his feet were flying over the soft grass, but then, it happened. Right in the middle of the playground, there was a small, sneaky pebble. Not a big one, just a tiny little thing, but it was hiding in the ground where Tommy couldn't see it. As his foot landed on the pebble, everything changed. His foot wobbled, his legs lost their balance, and before he knew it, he was falling through the air. Down, down, down he went, until, thud! Tommy landed on the hard ground, scraping his knee against the rough pebbles. The shock of it all made him freeze for a moment. He felt a sting in his knee, but even more than that, a sinking feeling crept into his heart. The happiness he'd felt just moments ago slipped away like a balloon floating into the sky. His eyes grew hot, and soon, big fat tears began to well up. Tommy sat on the ground, staring at his scraped knee. It wasn't the worst fall in the world, but to him, it felt like the end of all the fun. He tried to hold back the tears, but they were stronger than he thought. His chest felt tight, and his face scrunched up as the first tear slipped down his cheek. He sniffled, feeling all the magic and joy of the playground drain away, as if the whole world had suddenly turned gray. And the playground seemed to feel it too. The swings, which had been soaring high into the sky, slowed down and creaked sadly. The slides, once glittering and bright, seemed to lose their sparkle. Even the clouds above seemed to drift lazily, blocking the sun just enough to make everything feel duller. Tommy sat there, letting the tears fall, his heart heavy with the kind of sadness that only a scraped knee and an unexpected fall can bring. But this wasn't just about the scrape, it was the surprise of it all. One moment, everything had been perfect. The next, it had all fallen apart. His tiny world, so full of excitement just moments before, felt like it had crumbled around him. He didn't know what to do. All he could think about was how much it hurt, not just his knee, but inside too. That's when he heard it, a soft pattering of footsteps approaching him. It was someone small, but quick. Tommy didn't look up right away, but he could feel the presence getting closer. Whoever it was stopped just in front of him, standing so close that Tommy could see their shoes peeking into his blurry vision, still clouded by tears. Tommy? It was a familiar voice, Lily, his best friend in the whole world. Lily was a bit smaller than Tommy, but she was as fast as a lightning bolt. She had bright blue eyes, and her golden hair was always tied in two little pigtails that bounced when she ran. Today, she wore her favorite pink overalls, and hanging from her side, as always, was her most cherished toy, Mr. Cuddles, a soft stuffed bunny with big floppy ears and a lopsided smile. Tommy blinked through his tears but didn't say anything. His knee hurt too much, and his feelings were still all jumbled up inside. But Lily didn't need him to say anything. She could see the sadness in his eyes, the way he held his scraped knee, the small sniffles he was trying to hide. Without a word, Lily knelt down beside him, her face full of concern. She was thinking hard, trying to figure out what to do to make her friend feel better. She wanted to take away the pain, to bring back his smile, the one that always lit up the playground like sunshine. After a moment, Lily had an idea. She reached to her side, unhooking Mr. Cuddles from the strap of her overalls. Holding the stuffed bunny with both hands, she gently placed it in Tommy's lap. "Here, Tommy," she said, her voice soft but full of hope. "Don't cry. This will make you smile." Tommy looked down at the bunny. Mr. Cuddles had been Lily's favorite toy for as long as he could remember. She never went anywhere without it. Giving it to him now was the most special thing she could offer. He felt a warmth in his chest, a different kind of feeling than the pain in his knee. It was soft and gentle, like a hug made out of sunshine. Tommy hesitated for a moment, but then he picked up Mr. Cuddles and hugged the bunny tight. Something strange happened then. It wasn't just the feeling of the soft fabric in his hands or the way the bunny's lopsided smile seemed to cheer him up. It was more than that. It was like Mr. Cuddles had a bit of magic inside him, a magic that came from Lily's kindness. As Tommy hugged the bunny, he felt the warmth spread through his body, traveling from his chest to his toes, and then all the way up to his head. He could almost see the magic spark. Around him, little twinkles of light that danced in the air, like tiny stars spinning in a circle. His tears slowed, and before he knew it, he was no longer crying. The playground seemed to notice too. Slowly, the swings began to sway again, gently at first, but then with more energy. The sun peeked out from behind the clouds, casting golden rays over the slides and seesaws. The sparkle returned to the air, and the soft wind began to hum a happy tune. Everything was waking up again, as if the playground itself had been waiting for Tommy to feel better. Tommy sniffled one last time, but then, something amazing happened. He smiled. Not a big smile, but a small, real one. The kind that starts slow, like the first beam of light in the morning, but grows brighter with each passing second. The pain in his knee wasn't gone, but it didn't feel as bad anymore. What hurt even more, the sadness that had made him cry, had faded away completely. He looked up at Lily, who was watching him closely, her eyes full of hope. When she saw his smile, her face lit up too, as bright as the sun now shining over them. "There it is," Lily said with a grin. "I knew Mr. Cuddles would help." Tommy hugged Mr. Cuddles a little tighter, feeling thankful for his friend. "Thanks, Lily," he whispered, his voice still a little shaky but filled with gratitude. Lily stood up and reached out her hand. "Come on," she said brightly. "The playground's waiting for us. Let's go play." Tommy nodded and, with a deep breath, took her hand. Slowly, he stood up, wincing just a little from the scrape on his knee. But with Lily by his side and Mr. Cuddles in his arms, the world didn't seem so bad anymore. In fact, it felt a little brighter. As they walked back towards the swings, hand in hand, Tommy looked around. The playground was sparkling again, its magic fully restored. The swings swayed, the slides twisted, and the wind carried the sound of their laughter. Everything felt alive once more, just like it always had, like the playground was a part of them, connected to their joy and their hearts. And though Tommy's knee still stung a little, he knew one thing for sure: with a friend like Lily, even the toughest falls could be turned into something magical. Lily's kindness and the magical toy. As Tommy stood up, still holding Lily's hand, the warmth from Mr. Cuddles lingered in his heart. His knee still hurt a little, but it was as if the pain didn't matter as much anymore. The smile that Lily had brought back to his face stayed, growing a little bit bigger with each step they took. Lily walked beside him, swinging their hands back and forth as they moved toward the center of the playground. The sun was shining brighter now, peeking out from behind the clouds, and the air was filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing once again. The swings were gliding smoothly, the slides sparkling as they twisted and turned, and even the wind seemed to carry a playful tune, like the playground itself was singing. Tommy squeezed Mr. Cuddles tight, feeling the softness of the stuffed bunny against his cheek. He had never really paid much attention to Mr. Cuddles before, even though he'd seen Lily with it almost every day. But now, the bunny felt special. There was something about it, something magical. "Lily," Tommy said quietly, glancing over at his friend, "why do you always carry Mr. Cuddles with you?" Lily smiled, her eyes twinkling as she looked down at the bunny in Tommy's arms. "Because Mr. Cuddles is magic," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Magic? Tommy's eyes widened a little. He hadn't thought of it like that before, but now that he was holding the bunny, he could feel it too, the magic, that strange, warm feeling that made everything seem okay, even when it wasn't. "Yep." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Cuddles always knows how to make me feel better. Whenever I'm sad or scared, I just hold him close, and it's like all the bad feelings go away. He's like a little piece of sunshine I can carry with me." Tommy looked down at Mr. Cuddles, his fingers gently tracing the bunny's floppy ears and soft fur. The lopsided smile on the bunny's face seemed to wink up at him, as if Mr. Cuddles knew all the secrets of the world but wasn't telling. "Do you really think he's magic?" Tommy asked, his voice a little quieter, filled with wonder. He wasn't sure if magic was real, at least, not the kind you read about in stories. But this felt different. This magic was softer, kinder, the kind that wasn't about big spells or flying broomsticks, but about something else. Lily's smile grew even brighter. "Of course. But it's not the kind of magic you can see with your eyes," she explained. "It's the kind you feel. Like, when you're really happy, or when someone does something nice for you. It's that kind of magic." Tommy nodded, starting to understand. He could feel that magic now, the magic of kindness, of having a friend who cared enough to share something special, even if it was just a toy. It wasn't just the bunny that was magic, it was Lily's kindness, too. As they walked, the playground seemed to sparkle more and more, as if it could feel the joy in Tommy's heart. The wind picked up, swirling around them like a friendly breeze, and the grass under their feet felt softer with each step. But then, something unexpected happened. Just as they were about to reach the swings again, Mr. Cuddles started to feel different. At first, Tommy thought he was just imagining it. But no, there was definitely something happening. The bunny in his arms began to grow warmer, and then, right before his eyes, a faint glow surrounded the toy. "Lily!" Tommy gasped, stopping in his tracks. Lily turned to him, her eyes widening as she saw it too. Mr. Cuddles was glowing, a soft, golden light that shimmered like sunlight dancing on water. The little bunny, so ordinary just moments ago, was now surrounded by a magical aura. "Whoa!" Lily whispered, her eyes round with amazement. "I told you he was magic." Before Tommy could respond, something even more incredible happened. The bunny in his arms began to move. It wiggled, just a little at first, but then its floppy ears started to twitch, and its tiny arms stretched out as if it were waking up from a long nap. Tommy's heart raced. Was he dreaming? Was this really happening? Mr. Cuddles turned its head, its stitched eyes blinking once, and then, poof, a pair of soft, feathery wings sprouted from its back. Lily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in surprise. "Tommy! Look! I see it!" Tommy's voice was full of wonder. He couldn't believe what was happening, but he didn't want to blink in case it was all a dream. Mr. Cuddles, the little stuffed bunny that had always been just a toy, was now alive, and not just alive, but magical. With a gentle flap of its new wings, Mr. Cuddles lifted off from Tommy's hands, floating up into the air. It hovered there for a moment, as if getting used to flying, and then, without warning, it darted forward, circling around Tommy and Lily in joyful loops. Lily let out a laugh, her eyes shining with delight. "He's flying! Mr. Cuddles is flying!" Tommy watched in awe as the bunny zoomed through the air, leaving behind trails of glittering light. It wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. The magic felt so real, so alive, like it had been waiting inside Mr. Cuddles all along, just waiting for the right moment to come out. And then, as if sensing Tommy's excitement, Mr. Cuddles swooped down toward him, fluttering its wings just in front of his face. The bunny's eyes, which had once been just simple stitches, now sparkled with a light all their own. For a moment, Tommy and the bunny locked eyes, and in that brief instant, Tommy felt something amazing. He felt like he was floating too. Without even thinking, Tommy reached out his hand, and as soon as his fingers touched Mr. Cuddles' soft fur, something incredible happened. The world around him seemed to blur, and suddenly, Tommy wasn't standing on the ground anymore. He was flying. He soared through the air, with Mr. Cuddles leading the way, as the playground stretched out beneath him. The swings, the slides, the seesaws, they all looked so small from up here, like toys in a giant's backyard. Tommy's heart raced with excitement, but it wasn't just the flying that made him feel so alive. It was the feeling of being free, of having no fear, no sadness, just pure joy. As they flew higher and higher, Tommy could feel the magic all around him, a soft, warm glow that made everything seem possible. The wind whipped through his hair, and the sky above him seemed endless, full of light and color. It was as if the whole playground had transformed into a world of wonder, a place where anything could happen. Lily watched from below, her face full of amazement. She waved up at Tommy, her smile as bright as the sun. "Go, Tommy! You're flying!" Tommy laughed, the sound carrying through the air like music. He had never felt so happy, so light. It was as if all the sadness from earlier had completely disappeared, replaced by something much bigger, much brighter. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the magic started to fade. Slowly, the glowing light around Mr. Cuddles dimmed, and Tommy felt himself gently floating back down to the ground. He landed softly, the grass beneath his feet cushioning his fall. Mr. Cuddles fluttered down beside him, its wings disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. The bunny gave one last twitch of its nose before returning to its normal, stuffed self, lying limp in Tommy's hands once more. Tommy stared at the bunny in his arms, his heart still racing from the incredible experience. "Lily, did that really happen?" Lily ran up to him, her face glowing with excitement. "It really happened. You were flying, Tommy. I saw you." Tommy grinned, his whole body buzzing with energy. He couldn't believe it. One moment, he had been sitting on the ground, feeling sad and hurt, and the next, he had been flying through the air, carried by magic he didn't even know existed. "Mr. Cuddles really is magic," Tommy said softly, holding the bunny close to his chest. "I told you." Lily laughed, her eyes sparkling with pride. "He always knows how to make things better." Tommy nodded, still in awe of what had just happened. He looked down at Mr. Cuddles, feeling a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the bunny, but for Lily, who had shared her most special treasure with him. She hadn't hesitated for a second, even though Mr. Cuddles was her favorite toy in the whole world. That kind of kindness, Tommy realized, was its own kind of magic. "Thanks, Lily," Tommy said, his voice full of warmth, "for sharing Mr. Cuddles with me. It really did make me feel better." Lily smiled and shrugged as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "That's what friends do, right?" Tommy smiled back, and together, they walked toward the swings once more, hand in hand, the world around them shining a little brighter, a little more magical than before. The magical journey begins. With Mr. Cuddles back to his ordinary, stuffed self, Tommy and Lily wandered toward the swings. The magic of their recent adventure still clung to the air, like a spark waiting to ignite. Tommy's heart was racing with excitement, and he could feel that something even bigger was about to happen, something beyond just flying for a few moments. Lily skipped ahead, swinging her arms as if she, too, could feel the energy buzzing all around them. She had always believed in Mr. Cuddles' magic, but even she was surprised by how real it felt today. It wasn't just a little bit of magic like before, this was something else, something more powerful. As they neared the swings, Tommy's eyes wandered to the horizon. Beyond the playground, in the far distance, he could see the outline of a forest. It wasn't an ordinary forest, though. It shimmered like a painting come to life, its trees tall and twisting, their leaves glowing softly with hues of green and gold. The forest seemed to beckon, like it held secrets waiting to be discovered. "Lily, look at that," Tommy said, pointing toward the magical forest. Lily followed his gaze and gasped. "I've never noticed that forest before," she exclaimed. "It looks magical." The two of them stood in silence for a moment, gazing at the mysterious woods. It was like nothing they had ever seen before, so different from the cheerful playground they had always known. But something about it called to them, a whisper in the wind, urging them to come closer. Tommy clutched Mr. Cuddles a little tighter. The bunny felt warm again, just like before, and Tommy could sense that this was no ordinary forest. Whatever lay beyond the trees wasn't just magical, it was important. "I think we're supposed to go there," Tommy said, his voice quiet but determined. Lily turned to him, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Do you think we can?" Tommy nodded. "I think Mr. Cuddles is telling us to." Lily's face lit up with a wide grin, and without another word, they started toward the edge of the playground, leaving behind the swings and slides, the familiar comfort of their playtime world. With each step, the magical forest loomed larger, its towering trees casting long shadows over the grass. The wind picked up again, but this time it felt different, cooler, crisper, as if the air itself was alive with magic. As they approached the forest's edge, the sounds of the playground grew distant, replaced by the soft rustling of leaves and the faint chirping of birds hidden deep within the woods. The trees swayed gently, as if they were whispering secrets to one another, waiting for Tommy and Lily to come closer. Tommy hesitated for a moment, standing just at the boundary between the playground and the forest. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. There was a part of him that felt a little scared. After all, they didn't know what was waiting for them in the woods. But then he glanced down at Mr. Cuddles, the little bunny still tucked under his arm. The warmth of the toy filled him with courage, and he knew they couldn't turn back now. They had to see where the magic would lead them. "Lily, are you ready?" Tommy asked, his voice steady but filled with anticipation. Lily grinned and nodded. "I'm always ready for an adventure." And with that, they stepped into the forest. As soon as they entered, everything changed. The air was thicker here, filled with the scent of pine and earth. The trees stretched high above them, their branches forming a canopy that let only dappled sunlight filter through, casting the ground in a patchwork of gold and green. The forest was quiet, but not in a lonely way. It was the kind of quiet that felt alive, like the woods were watching them, waiting for something to happen. Tommy and Lily walked deeper into the forest, their footsteps soft on the mossy ground. Every now and then, they would hear a rustle in the leaves, or the distant sound of water trickling through a hidden stream. But no matter where they looked, they saw no sign of anyone or anything else. It was just them, alone in this enchanted world. But as they moved further in, something strange began to happen. The trees, which had been standing tall and still, seemed to shift. At first, it was subtle, just a slight sway, a rustle in the leaves that seemed a little too purposeful. But soon, it became clear that the forest itself was moving. The trees were shifting, their roots slowly crawling along the ground, repositioning themselves as if they were alive. "Lily," Tommy whispered, his voice tinged with awe. "The trees are moving." Lily stared in wonder. "I've never seen anything like this. It's like the forest is alive." As they watched, the trees formed a narrow path, opening up before them like a doorway. The branches above shifted, allowing more sunlight to stream down, illuminating the path ahead. It was as if the forest was guiding them, leading them somewhere deeper within its heart. "Do you think we should follow it?" Tommy asked, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Lily nodded eagerly. "Of course. The forest wants us to follow, it's part of the adventure." With Mr. Cuddles still tucked safely under his arm, Tommy took a deep breath and stepped onto the newly formed path, Lily right beside him. The ground beneath their feet was soft and cool, and the further they went, the more they could feel the magic swirling around them. It was like an invisible force, pulling them forward, urging them to keep going. They walked for what felt like hours, though it was hard to tell time in a place like this. The forest seemed to bend and shift around them, the trees whispering to one another in a language they couldn't quite understand. But there was no fear in their hearts, only wonder and excitement. And then, just as suddenly as the path had appeared, it opened up into a wide, sunlit clearing. The sight that greeted them took their breath away. In the center of the clearing stood an enormous, ancient tree. Its trunk was wider than a house, and its branches stretched out like arms, casting a deep shade over the ground below. The tree glowed faintly, its bark shimmering with silver and gold, as if it were made from some kind of enchanted wood. At its base, there was a large, hollow opening, an entrance that seemed to invite them in. Wow! Tommy breathed, staring up at the magnificent tree. This must be where the magic is coming from. Lily nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. I think we've found the heart of the forest. They both stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The tree felt alive, just like the rest of the forest, but its magic was stronger, more ancient. It pulsed with energy, and Tommy could feel it in his bones. This was the source of the forest's enchantment, the place where all the magic came from. As they approached the tree, a soft glow emanated from the hollow opening. Tommy could see a faint light flickering inside, and the air around them seemed to hum with anticipation. Should we go in? Tommy asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lily didn't hesitate. We have to. This is what we've been looking for. Together, they stepped into the hollow opening of the tree. The air inside was cool and filled with the scent of pine and something sweet, like honey. The walls of the tree were smooth, shimmering with the same golden light that surrounded the forest. As they moved further in, the light grew brighter, and soon, they found themselves in a small chamber at the center of the tree. In the middle of the chamber stood a pedestal, and on top of it rested a small, glowing orb. The orb pulsed with a soft, golden light, casting long shadows across the room. It was mesmerizing, and as soon as Tommy laid eyes on it, he knew it was important. Lily, look at that, Tommy said, pointing to the orb. Lily's eyes widened. It's beautiful. I wonder what it does. Tommy stepped closer, feeling drawn to the orb's warm glow. He reached out his hand, hesitating for just a moment before his fingers brushed against its smooth surface. The moment he touched it, the orb began to glow even brighter. Light filled the chamber, and Tommy felt a surge of energy course through him. It was as if the magic of the forest had entered his body, filling him with strength and warmth. He could feel the power of the ancient tree, the whispers of the forest, all rushing through him at once. But there was something else, too, something deeper. As the light grew brighter, Tommy saw visions flickering in his mind. He saw the playground, the magical swings and slides, and he saw himself and Lily, playing and laughing together. But then, the vision shifted, and he saw something darker, shadows creeping through the forest, a figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching them. Tommy gasped, pulling his hand away from the orb. Lily, I think something's coming, he whispered, his voice shaking. Lily looked at him, her expression serious now. What did you see? I saw shadows. Someone was watching us. I think. Tommy swallowed hard. I think we're not alone in the forest. Lily's face grew thoughtful. Maybe that's why we're here, she said quietly. Maybe we were brought here to stop whatever's coming. Tommy nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. The magic of the forest had led them to this place, to the ancient tree and the glowing orb. But now, it was clear that their adventure was only just beginning. There was something out there, something hidden in the shadows, and they had to find out what it was before it was too late. With one last look at the glowing orb, Tommy and Lily stepped out of the chamber and back into the clearing. The forest around them felt different now, darker, more mysterious. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves with an urgent whisper, as if the woods were trying to warn them. "We have to be careful," Tommy said, gripping Mr. Cuddles tightly. "Something's out there." Lily nodded, her eyes scanning the trees. "But we're not afraid," she said firmly. "We have each other, and we have magic on our side." With that, they set off into the forest once more, determined to face whatever lay ahead. Into the shadows. Tommy and Lily walked deeper into the forest, the air growing cooler and the light from the ancient tree fading behind them. The towering trees that had once felt inviting now seemed to close in around them, their branches swaying in the wind like long, twisted fingers. The golden glow that had filled the forest earlier was gone, replaced by shadows that seemed to stretch out from every corner, moving with a life of their own. But even as the forest grew darker, Tommy felt a steady warmth in his chest, a reminder of the magic they had discovered. Mr. Cuddles was tucked securely under his arm, and every now and then, Tommy would glance down at the little bunny, feeling reassured by its presence. After all, it was Mr. Cuddles who had shown them the way to the magic in the first place. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to move with even more purpose. Her eyes were focused, scanning the trees around them for any sign of movement. Though her usual playfulness was still there, it was clear that she sensed the danger ahead. She kept close to Tommy, her hand occasionally brushing against his arm as if to remind him that they were in this together. The wind picked up, and the trees rustled in response, their leaves whispering secrets that neither Tommy nor Lily could understand. The shadows flickered and shifted, making it feel as though the forest itself was alive, watching their every move. It was unsettling, and Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. Suddenly, there was a noise, a low, distant growl that seemed to echo through the trees. Tommy froze in his tracks, his heart racing. "Did you hear that?" he whispered, clutching Mr. Cuddles tighter. Lily nodded, her face serious. "Yeah. We're not alone." They both stood still, listening. The growl came again, closer this time, and Tommy's eyes darted around, trying to find the source. But the shadows were too thick, and the trees too dense, it was impossible to tell where the sound was coming from. "We need to keep moving," Lily said quietly. "Whatever it is, we can't let it catch us." Tommy nodded, and together they quickened their pace, their footsteps soft on the forest floor. The growling continued, sometimes faint, sometimes louder, always just on the edge of their hearing. It was as if the creature was circling them, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The path through the forest twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the unknown. The trees grew taller and more twisted, their branches interwoven like a web of darkness. The sunlight barely broke through the canopy now, casting long, eerie shadows that danced across the ground. Every now and then, Tommy would glance over his shoulder, certain that he had seen something moving in the darkness. But each time, there was nothing, just the swaying trees and the shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Lily stayed close, her eyes sharp and alert. She had always been the braver of the two, and Tommy was grateful for her steady presence. But even Lily couldn't hide the fact that something was wrong. The magic that had once filled the air was fading, replaced by a growing sense of unease. After what felt like hours of walking, they came to a clearing. But unlike the sunlit meadow they had found before, this clearing was dark and foreboding. In the center stood a tall, twisted figure, its body made of black vines and shadows, its eyes glowing with an eerie red light. It was the creature that had been following them, and now it stood directly in their path. Tommy's breath caught in his throat. The figure was unlike anything he had ever seen before, its form shifting and changing as if it were made from the very shadows that surrounded them. It was tall, towering over the trees, and its eyes burned with a malevolent intensity. Lily stepped in front of Tommy, her hands balled into fists. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice strong despite the fear in her eyes. The creature didn't answer. Instead, it moved closer, its shadowy form stretching out toward them like long, grasping tendrils. Tommy could feel the air around them grow colder, and his heart pounded in his chest. He clutched Mr. Cuddles tightly, hoping that the magic inside the little bunny could protect them. But nothing happened. The warmth that had filled Mr. Cuddles before was gone, replaced by a cold, hollow feeling. Tommy's stomach sank. The magic that had saved them before wasn't working now. The creature moved even closer, its glowing red eyes locked on Tommy. He took a step back, his mind racing. What were they supposed to do? How could they stop something like this? Lily didn't hesitate. "Run, Tommy," she yelled, grabbing his arm and pulling him away from the creature. They sprinted back into the forest, their feet pounding against the ground. The shadows seemed to move with them, twisting and writhing as they ran. The creature's growl echoed through the trees, and Tommy could hear the sound of its twisted form crashing through the undergrowth, chasing after them. "Where do we go?" Tommy shouted, his breath coming in gasps. "I don't know," Lily replied, her voice strained. "Just keep running." The forest seemed to stretch on forever, the trees blurring together as they raced through the darkness. The creature was fast, its heavy footsteps growing louder with every second. But no matter how fast they ran, it seemed to be gaining on them. Just when Tommy thought they couldn't run any further, they burst into another clearing. This one was different from the others. It was smaller, more enclosed, and in the center stood a large stone archway covered in glowing, ancient runes. The archway pulsed with a soft, blue light, and the air around it hummed with magic. Tommy and Lily skidded to a stop in front of the archway, both of them breathing heavily. The creature was still behind them, its growl echoing through the trees. But as they stood before the archway, the magic that had seemed so distant before suddenly surged back to life. Tommy could feel it in the air, strong and powerful, like a wave of energy that washed over them. The cold, dark feeling that had surrounded them was gone, replaced by the warm, familiar glow of magic. He looked at Lily, who was staring at the archway with wide eyes. "Do you think it's a way out?" Tommy asked, his voice trembling with hope. Lily nodded slowly. "I think so. But we don't know where it leads." The creature was getting closer now, its red eyes glowing through the trees. They didn't have time to think. Tommy could feel the ground trembling beneath their feet as the shadowy figure drew near. "We have to go," Tommy shouted, grabbing Lily's hand and pulling her toward the archway. Together, they ran toward the glowing blue light. As they reached the stone archway, Tommy could feel the magic pulsing through the air, stronger than anything he had felt before. He took one last glance at the forest behind them, the creature's glowing eyes locked on them, before stepping through the archway. For a brief moment, there was nothing but blinding light, and then everything went still. When Tommy opened his eyes, they were standing in a new place, a place unlike anything they had ever seen. The forest was gone, replaced by rolling hills of soft, green grass that stretched out as far as the eye could see. The sky above them was a deep, endless blue, dotted with fluffy white clouds. A gentle breeze blew through the air, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh rain. Tommy blinked in surprise, his heart still racing. Where are we?" he asked, looking around in awe. Lily shook her head, just as bewildered. "I don't know, but I think we're safe." The creature was gone. The shadows that had chased them through the forest were nowhere to be seen. It was as if they had stepped into an entirely new world, one filled with light and peace instead of darkness and danger. Tommy looked down at Mr. Cuddles, still tucked under his arm. The little bunny felt warm again, the familiar glow of magic slowly returning to it. Whatever had happened, they had escaped the creature, and the magic that had led them this far was still with them. Lily smiled, her eyes shining with relief. "We made it." Tommy nodded, a smile spreading across his face. They had faced the darkness, outrun the shadows, and now they were standing in a place of peace and beauty. But even though they had escaped, Tommy knew their journey wasn't over. There was still more to discover, more mysteries to unravel. And somewhere, in the distance, the magic was still calling to them. The Valley of Whispers. Tommy and Lily took in the breathtaking scene before them, the endless hills and the wide, open sky. It felt like they had stepped into a dream, far away from the dark forest and the shadowy creature that had chased them. The air was crisp and clean, and the wind played gently with their hair, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers. For a moment, everything was peaceful. But the sense of safety didn't last long. Tommy felt a faint shiver run down his spine as he glanced around the unfamiliar landscape. Though it was beautiful, there was something strange about this place. It was too quiet, too still. The wind whispered through the grass, but it almost sounded like voices, faint, soft, just at the edge of hearing. It was as if the valley itself was speaking to them, but Tommy couldn't quite understand what it was trying to say. Lily sensed it too. She narrowed her eyes and took a step closer to Tommy, her hand brushing against his arm. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. Tommy nodded, his grip tightening around Mr. Cuddles. "Yeah, it sounds like voices." The whispers grew louder for a moment, then faded again, as if they were being carried away on the breeze. Tommy and Lily exchanged nervous glances. They had escaped the darkness of the forest, but now they had entered a place filled with mysteries of its own. "We should keep moving," Lily said, her voice more confident than she felt. "We don't know what's out here, and it's better to find a safe spot before it gets dark." Tommy agreed. The last thing they wanted was to find themselves trapped in another dangerous situation, especially in a place as strange as this. With one last glance at the stone archway behind them, they set off across the rolling hills. The grass beneath their feet was soft and cool, and as they walked, the valley seemed to stretch out endlessly before them. The sky remained a brilliant blue, but the whispering wind followed them wherever they went. At times, Tommy thought he could make out words, faint phrases like "beware" and "secrets," but they were too soft to be sure. After walking for what felt like hours, they came across a narrow path that wound through the hills. The path was well-trodden, as if others had traveled it before, though there were no signs of life anywhere in sight. The wind picked up again, carrying the whispers with it, and Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Do you think anyone lives here?" Tommy asked, glancing around at the empty landscape. Lily frowned, her eyes scanning the horizon. "I don't know." But if they do, I hope they're friendly. They continued along the path, their footsteps quiet on the soft ground. The whispers seemed to grow stronger the further they went, and Tommy couldn't help but feel like the valley was trying to tell them something important. He glanced down at Mr. Cuddles, hoping for some sign of the magic they had come to rely on, but the little bunny remained still, its familiar warmth absent. As they rounded a bend in the path, the landscape suddenly changed. The hills gave way to a wide, open plain, and in the distance, they could see the outlines of strange, stone structures. They looked like ancient ruins, tall pillars and crumbling walls covered in moss and vines. The air around them was filled with an eerie stillness, and the whispers grew louder, echoing off the stone. "Do you see that?" Lily asked, pointing toward the ruins. Tommy nodded, his heart racing. "Yeah. Should we go check it out?" Lily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "We have to. Maybe we'll find answers there." They made their way toward the ruins, the wind swirling around them with a sense of urgency. As they approached, Tommy could see that the structures were much older than he had first thought. The stone pillars were cracked and weathered, and the walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols that looked like the same kind of runes they had seen on the archway in the forest. The ruins were quiet, but the whispers seemed to gather here, swirling around the stone like invisible ghosts. Tommy shivered, feeling a chill despite the warm sunlight. There was something ancient about this place, something that had been here long before they arrived. Lily stepped forward cautiously, her eyes scanning the ruins. "This place feels different," she murmured. "Like it's waiting for something." Tommy nodded, his gaze fixed on the glowing symbols. "Do you think it has anything to do with the magic?" "Maybe," Lily said thoughtfully. "But we need to be careful. We don't know what these symbols mean." They moved deeper into the ruins, their footsteps echoing off the stone. The structures were arranged in a circle, almost like an ancient gathering place, with a large, flat stone in the center. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, pulsing with a soft blue light, and Tommy could feel a strange energy in the air, an energy that felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a storm. Tommy and Lily froze, their eyes wide with fear. The wind picked up, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. "What's happening?" Tommy gasped, clutching Mr. Cuddles to his chest. Lily shook her head, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "I don't know. But something's waking up." The ground shook again, and the air was filled with a strange, humming sound. The glowing symbols on the walls flared brighter, casting eerie blue light across the ruins. And then, from the center of the circle, a figure began to rise. It was made of stone, tall and imposing, with a face carved into its surface that looked ancient and wise. Its eyes glowed with the same blue light as the runes, and as it stood, it seemed to absorb the energy from the air around it. The whispers quieted, replaced by a deep, resonant voice that seemed to come from the stone figure itself. "Who dares to awaken the guardian of the valley?" the voice boomed, echoing across the ruins. Tommy and Lily stepped back, their hearts pounding. The guardian towered over them, its stone face expressionless but somehow filled with power. "We didn't mean to," Lily called out, her voice trembling but strong. "We were just looking for answers. We're trying to stop something bad from happening." The guardian's glowing eyes focused on them, and for a moment, there was silence. Then the deep voice spoke again, softer this time but still filled with authority. You seek answers, but the valley holds more secrets than you know. It is a place of power, a place where the past and future meet. But it is also a place of danger. If you wish to continue, you must prove yourselves worthy. Tommy swallowed hard. Prove ourselves? How? The guardian raised one massive stone hand and pointed toward the far end of the ruins. There, standing against the wall, was a large door, tall and carved with more glowing symbols. It pulsed with the same blue light, and the energy around it crackled with magic. Beyond that door lies the heart of the valley, the guardian said. It is a place where few have dared to go. But if you wish to find what you seek, you must enter. Only those who possess true courage and wisdom can survive the challenges within. Lily looked at Tommy, her eyes wide. Do you think we can do it? Tommy took a deep breath, his mind racing. They had already come so far, faced so many dangers. And though the idea of stepping into the unknown once again filled him with fear, he knew they couldn't turn back now. The magic had brought them here for a reason, and if they were going to find the answers they needed, they had to keep going. We have to try, Tommy said, his voice steady. We didn't come all this way to give up now. Lily nodded, her resolve strengthening. Then let's do it. With a determined glance at the guardian, they walked toward the glowing door. The stone figure watched them silently, its eyes following their every move. As they approached, the door seemed to hum with energy, the glowing symbols shifting and changing as if they were alive. Tommy reached out and placed his hand on the door. The moment his fingers touched the surface, a surge of magic flowed through him, stronger than anything he had felt before. It was as if the door was testing him, searching for something within him. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deep rumble, the door began to open, the stone sliding away to reveal a dark passage beyond. The air that flowed from the passage was cool and heavy, filled with the scent of ancient earth and magic. Tommy and Lily exchanged one last look, their hearts racing. Ready? Tommy asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lily nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Ready. Together, they stepped through the door and into the unknown. The trials of courage. Tommy and Lily stepped into the dark passageway, their hearts pounding as they left the bright, open valley behind. The stone door slid shut behind them with a heavy thud, sealing them inside. The air in the passage was cool and damp, filled with the earthy scent of old stone and magic. The walls glowed faintly with the same blue runes they had seen outside, casting just enough light to see by. Lily squeezed Tommy's hand, her voice low and steady. We can do this. We've made it this far. Tommy nodded, though he couldn't shake the nervous flutter in his stomach. He clutched Mr. Cuddles tightly, feeling the faint warmth of the bunny's magic once again. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind him that they weren't alone. The magic was still with them, even here in the heart of the valley. The passage twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the stone. The air grew colder the further they went, and the glowing runes became more elaborate, spiraling along the walls in intricate patterns. Every now and then, Tommy thought he could hear faint whispers, like the ones they had heard in the valley, but this time they seemed closer, almost like they were coming from the walls themselves. After what felt like hours, the passage finally opened up into a large chamber. The room was circular, with smooth stone walls and a high, domed ceiling. In the center of the chamber stood 3 stone pillars, each one carved with the same glowing runes that decorated the walls. The air hummed with magic, and Tommy could feel the power of the valley radiating from the pillars. But there was something else in the chamber, something darker. As Tommy and Lily stepped closer, they saw that each pillar had a different symbol carved into it. The first pillar bore the image of a flame, flickering and dancing in the blue light. The second pillar had the symbol of a large, heavy chain, twisted and knotted. And the third pillar showed the image of a winding maze, its paths twisting and turning in impossible directions. Lily frowned, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What do you think these symbols mean?" Tommy stared at the pillars, feeling a strange sense of foreboding. "I don't know, but I think they're part of the trials the Guardian mentioned." As if in response to Tommy's words, the room began to tremble. The ground beneath their feet shook, and the runes on the pillars flared brighter. The air was filled with a low, humming sound, and the shadows in the room seemed to shift and change, moving like living things. Then, with a deep rumble, the first pillar, the one with the flame, began to move. The stone cracked and groaned as the pillar rose higher into the air, and from its center, a glowing orb of light appeared. The orb hovered in the air for a moment, pulsing with a soft, orange glow, before it shot toward the far end of the chamber. Tommy and Lily watched in awe as the orb of light flew across the room and vanished into a dark, narrow doorway that had appeared in the wall. The doorway was small and barely visible in the dim light, but it seemed to pulse with the same orange glow as the orb. "I think that's the first trial," Tommy said, his voice filled with both excitement and dread. Lily nodded, her eyes focused on the doorway. "Then we have to go through it. The Guardian said we have to prove ourselves." They approached the doorway cautiously, the orange glow flickering like firelight as they drew closer. The air around the door was warm, and as they stepped through, they found themselves in a long, narrow corridor. The walls were smooth stone, but the air was filled with heat, and the faint smell of smoke hung in the air. At the end of the corridor, they entered another chamber, this one much larger than the first. The floor was covered in blackened stone, and in the center of the room was a massive pit filled with bubbling, molten lava. The heat from the pit was intense, and Tommy could feel it prickling against his skin. But it wasn't just the lava that caught their attention. On the far side of the chamber, a narrow stone bridge stretched across the pit, leading to a small pedestal. On top of the pedestal sat a glowing crystal, flickering with the same orange light as the orb that had led them here. "That must be the way to pass the trial," Lily said, pointing to the crystal. Tommy's heart sank as he looked at the narrow stone bridge. It was barely wide enough for one person to walk across, and the lava below bubbled and hissed, sending up waves of intense heat. One wrong step, and they would fall into the fiery pit. "Are we supposed to cross that?" Tommy asked, his voice trembling. Lily took a deep breath, her face determined. "We don't have a choice. We have to trust ourselves." She stepped forward, testing the first stone with her foot. The bridge was solid, but the heat from the lava made the air shimmer around it, making it difficult to see clearly. Lily took another step, her balance steady as she moved further out onto the bridge. Tommy hesitated, his fear rising. The thought of crossing that narrow bridge, with nothing but the pit of lava beneath him, was terrifying. But he couldn't let Lily go alone. He clutched Mr. Cuddles tightly, feeling the bunny's warmth, and took a deep breath. "I can do this," he whispered to himself. "I have to." With shaking hands, Tommy stepped onto the bridge. The heat was even more intense now, and the air wavered around him, making the stone path seem like it was moving. He kept his eyes focused on Lily, who was already halfway across the bridge, her steps careful and deliberate. Step by step, Tommy followed her, his heart pounding in his chest. The lava bubbled and spat below him, and he could feel the sweat dripping down his face. His legs trembled with every step, but he forced himself to keep going. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the other side. Lily smiled at him, her face flushed from the heat but filled with relief. "We made it," she said, her voice breathless. Tommy let out a shaky laugh, his legs weak with relief. "Yeah, we did." Lily approached the pedestal and carefully reached out to touch the glowing crystal. The moment her fingers made contact, the crystal flared brightly, filling the room with a warm, orange light. The heat from the lava seemed to subside, and the bridge behind them solidified, becoming wider and more stable. With the trial complete, the crystal floated into the air and began to glow even brighter. It hovered above them for a moment before shooting back toward the doorway they had entered through, leaving a trail of orange light in its wake. "One down," Lily said with a grin. "Two to go." Tommy nodded, though the thought of facing two more trials filled him with dread. The first one had been terrifying, and he could only imagine what the next two would be like. They made their way back to the main chamber, where the second pillar, the one with the twisted chain, was already glowing. Just like before, a glowing orb appeared from the pillar and shot toward another dark doorway that had appeared in the wall. Lily took a deep breath. "Ready for the next one?" Tommy nodded, though his heart was still racing from the first trial. "Yeah, let's go." They stepped through the second doorway, this one much colder than the first. The air was heavy, and the sound of clinking metal filled the space around them. They walked down a narrow corridor until they reached another chamber, this one lined with iron bars and chains. In the center of the room was a large, iron cage, and inside the cage sat a massive creature, its body made of thick, twisted chains. The creature's eyes glowed with a dull red light, and it rattled and clinked as it shifted inside the cage. On the far side of the room, another pedestal stood, this one holding a key made of the same glowing blue light as the runes on the walls. Lily stared at the creature in the cage, her face pale. "We have to get that key to pass this trial, but we'll have to go past that thing." Tommy's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at the creature. It was massive, and even though it was trapped inside the cage, it looked dangerous. The chains that made up its body shifted and clinked, and every time it moved, the ground seemed to shake. Lily took a deep breath. "We need to be careful. It's trapped, but if we get too close, who knows what it'll do." Tommy nodded, his mouth dry. "What if we try to distract it?" Lily's eyes brightened. "That might work. One of us can distract it while the other grabs the key." Tommy swallowed hard, his hands trembling. "Okay. I'll be the distraction." Lily smiled at him, her eyes filled with trust. "You're brave, Tommy. I know you can do it." Tommy wasn't sure if he felt brave, but he nodded anyway. He clutched Mr. Cuddles tightly, feeling the bunny's comforting warmth, and slowly stepped toward the cage. The creature inside the cage shifted, its red eyes locking onto Tommy. It rattled and clinked as it moved, the chains that made up its body scraping against the iron bars. "Hey!" Tommy called out, his voice shaking but strong. "Over here." The creature let out a low, rumbling growl and lunged at the bars of the cage, its chains clattering loudly as it reached for Tommy. The iron bars held, but the force of the creature's attack made the entire room shake. While the creature was focused on Tommy, Lily darted toward the pedestal, her movements quick and quiet. She reached out and grabbed the glowing key, her fingers wrapping around the cool metal. The moment she touched it, the key flared brightly, and the creature let out a furious roar. Tommy's heart raced as the creature rattled and shook the cage, but the iron bars held firm. Lily hurried back toward him, the glowing key clutched tightly in her hand. "Let's go," she called, her voice urgent. Tommy didn't need to be told twice. He turned and ran toward the doorway, his heart pounding in his chest as the creature roared behind them. They sprinted down the corridor and back into the main chamber, the sound of clinking chains fading as they left the trial behind. Back in the main chamber, the second pillar dimmed, and the glowing key shot toward the large stone door at the center of the room, leaving a trail of blue light behind it. "Two down," Lily said, her face flushed with excitement. "Just one more to go." Tommy nodded, though he was exhausted from the trials. His body ached, and his heart was still racing, but he knew they had to keep going. The third pillar, the one with the maze, began to glow, and just like before, a glowing orb appeared and shot toward the final doorway. "This is it," Lily said, her voice filled with determination. "One more trial, and we'll prove ourselves." Tommy took a deep breath, his hands trembling as he gripped Mr. Cuddles. "Let's finish this." With one final glance at the glowing pillar, they stepped through the doorway, ready to face the last trial. The Labyrinth of Shadows. As Tommy and Lily stepped through the doorway, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. They found themselves in a long, twisting corridor that seemed to stretch on forever, illuminated by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. The air was heavy with an eerie silence, broken only by the soft echo of their footsteps. The corridor wound deeper and deeper into the heart of the labyrinth, and with each step, the sense of foreboding grew stronger. The walls were lined with intricate carvings depicting winding paths and tangled knots, resembling the very maze they had seen on the pillar. Tommy felt a shiver run down his spine. It was as if the maze itself were alive, watching them. "Do you think we can find our way through?" Lily asked, glancing around nervously. Her voice was steady, but Tommy could hear the uncertainty beneath the surface. Tommy nodded, trying to sound braver than he felt. "We have to. If we can get to the end, I bet there's something waiting for us." They pressed on, and after a few twists and turns, they reached a fork in the path. The corridor split into 3 different directions, each one cloaked in shadow. "Which way should we go?" Lily pondered, peering down each passageway. They all looked the same. Tommy closed his eyes for a moment, trying to remember the feeling of the glowing magic that had guided them so far. "Maybe we should just follow our instincts. The magic will lead us." "Okay," Lily agreed, and they chose the left path. The deeper they went into the maze, the more confusing it became. They turned corner after corner, and soon the familiar sound of their footsteps was replaced by an unsettling silence. As they continued down the left corridor, Tommy couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows flickered and danced, creating shapes that loomed over them. Suddenly, they found themselves at another fork. This time, the choices were more daunting. One path was dark and narrow, another was wide and filled with glowing vines, while the last path was steep and rocky. Lily bit her lip in thought. I don't like the dark one. It feels too scary. Tommy nodded in agreement. The vines look interesting, but they might be hiding something. What about the rocky path? Let's try the rocky path, Lily said, determination flashing in her eyes. It might be difficult, but it could lead us somewhere good. With that, they chose the rocky path and began to climb. The stones were uneven, and Tommy had to be careful not to trip. He focused on the way ahead, feeling the reassuring weight of Mr. Cuddles in his arms. As they climbed higher, they reached a ledge overlooking a vast chamber. Tommy and Lily peered down, their eyes widening in awe. Below them was a sprawling maze, filled with twisting paths, towering hedges, and a glimmering pond at its center. The moonlight streamed down from an opening above, illuminating the maze in an ethereal glow. Wow, Lily breathed. It's beautiful. Tommy nodded, captivated by the sight. But we need to get down there. That must be where the exit is. Just as they turned to find a way down, a low growl echoed from behind them. They spun around to see a shadowy figure emerging from the darkness, its form shifting and changing like smoke. What are you doing in my maze? It rumbled, its voice deep and menacing. The creature was tall and thin, with long, wispy arms that seemed to reach out like tendrils of darkness. Tommy's heart raced as he instinctively stepped in front of Lily, clutching Mr. Cuddles tightly. We're just trying to pass the last trial, he shouted, trying to sound braver than he felt. We didn't mean any harm. The creature tilted its head, its glowing eyes narrowing. Many have come before you, but few have succeeded. What makes you think you can navigate the labyrinth? We have each other, Lily said, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. We believe in our friendship and our courage. The creature seemed to consider this, its form shifting slightly as if the shadows were swirling around it. Very well. If you wish to pass, you must face the challenges of the labyrinth. Choose your path wisely, for the shadows will try to lead you astray. With that, the creature faded into the darkness, leaving Tommy and Lily alone once again. They exchanged worried glances but knew they had to keep moving. Which way do you think we should go? Tommy asked, looking at the maze below. Lily pointed toward the glimmering pond at the center. That looks like it could be important. Maybe we should head that way. They carefully made their way down the rocky path, following the outline of the maze. As they descended, the shadows around them thickened, and the air grew colder. They could hear faint whispers echoing through the maze, words they couldn't quite make out, but the tone was unsettling. Once they reached the ground, they stood before the entrance to the maze. Towering hedges loomed before them, forming a seemingly endless series of paths. Taking a deep breath, they stepped inside, determined to find their way to the pond. As they ventured deeper into the maze, they encountered challenges that tested their resolve. At one point, they found themselves facing a hedge that shimmered with golden light. What's that? Tommy asked, pointing at the hedge. Lily squinted, trying to see. It looks like it's blocking the path. Maybe we should try to go around. They turned to find another way, only to discover the path behind them had vanished. Panic surged in Tommy's chest. What happened? We were just there. Stay calm. Lily urged, her voice steady. We can find another way. They retraced their steps, determined not to be misled by the maze's tricks. As they moved, they heard the whispers again, growing louder and more insistent. Shadows flickered around them, trying to confuse them, but Tommy and Lily pressed on, holding tightly to each other. Finally, after what felt like hours, they emerged into a clearing. In the center was the shimmering pond, surrounded by vibrant flowers that glowed in the moonlight. The water sparkled like diamonds, and the air was filled with a soft, melodic hum. "Look!" Lily exclaimed, pointing to the pond. "It's beautiful." But as they approached the water's edge, the whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a storm. Tommy looked around, trying to pinpoint the source of the sounds. "What do they want?" "They're trying to distract us," Lily said, her voice steady. "We have to stay focused." Suddenly, the surface of the pond began to ripple, and an image appeared in the water. It was a reflection of Tommy and Lily, but it showed them in a different light, doubtful and afraid, standing still while the world around them faded. Tommy felt a pang of fear in his chest. "Is that what we look like?" "No," Lily said firmly, stepping closer to the water. "That's not who we are. We're brave. We've made it this far together." As if her words had power, the image in the water shifted, and the whispers faded. The pond began to glow brighter, illuminating the entire clearing. The flowers swayed gently as if responding to their courage. Tommy took a deep breath, stepping forward. "We won't let the shadows win. We believe in ourselves and in our friendship." With that declaration, the pond surged with light, and the water began to ripple again. The reflections morphed into a path leading deeper into the maze. It beckoned them to follow. "Let's go," Lily urged, her eyes bright with determination. They plunged into the water, feeling the coolness envelop them as they swam through the shimmering liquid. The light guided them through the depths, illuminating the way forward until they emerged on the other side, gasping for air. Standing on solid ground once more, they looked around. They were in a new part of the maze, where the walls were covered in bright, glowing flowers and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blossoms. "We did it!" Tommy cheered, relief flooding through him. "We passed the trial." But even as they celebrated, the shadows still lingered around the edges of the maze, watching, waiting. "Let's keep moving," Lily said, her voice firm. "We're almost there." With renewed energy, they pressed forward, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the final stretch of the labyrinth. The final confrontation and the power of friendship. With the glowing flowers lighting their path, Tommy and Lily ventured deeper into the maze. The air was filled with a sweet fragrance, but the shadows still loomed around them, whispering doubts that lingered just beyond their hearing. Each step forward felt like a step into the unknown, but their determination burned bright. "I can feel it, Tommy," Lily said, glancing back at the glowing pond, which shimmered like a star in the distance. "We're getting closer to the end of the maze. We can do this." Tommy nodded, feeling a surge of confidence. "We've come so far. Nothing can stop us now." As they rounded a corner, the maze opened up into a grand chamber that took their breath away. The walls were lined with shimmering crystals that reflected light like a million stars. In the center stood a magnificent pedestal, adorned with intricate carvings and glowing runes, radiating warmth and magic. Atop the pedestal sat a radiant key, pulsing with energy. It was more beautiful than anything they had seen before, and Tommy felt a strange connection to it, as if it were calling out to them. But just as they approached, a powerful roar echoed through the chamber, sending a tremor through the ground. The shadows thickened, coalescing into a menacing figure, a dark creature with glowing red eyes and twisted horns, looming over them. "Who dares to claim the key?" the creature bellowed, its voice reverberating through the chamber like thunder. Tommy stepped back, feeling a wave of fear wash over him. "We just want to prove ourselves," he shouted, trying to sound brave. "We want to show that friendship can conquer all." The creature let out a chilling laugh. "Friendship? You think mere friendship can overcome the darkness? You're weak, just like all the others who have come before you." "Don't listen to it, Tommy," Lily urged, her voice strong. "We've come too far to give in now. We believe in each other." With her words echoing in his heart, Tommy took a deep breath and stepped forward, his grip tightening around Mr. Cuddles. "You're wrong. Friendship gives us strength. It's what brought us through the trials of the maze." The creature snarled, shifting closer. "You think you can defeat me? Show me the strength of your bond." Suddenly, the chamber began to tremble, and the shadows surged forward, trying to envelop Tommy and Lily. Tommy felt panic rise within him, but he quickly turned to Lily, whose determination shone brighter than ever. "Together," she shouted, extending her hand to him. "We can do this together." Tommy took her hand, and as their fingers intertwined, a warm light surged through them, pushing back the shadows. The creature's eyes widened in surprise, but it quickly regained its composure. "Foolish children! You think you can defeat me with a simple light?" it roared, lunging toward them. But as it drew near, Tommy and Lily focused on their friendship, remembering all the moments they had shared, the laughter, the adventures, the challenges they had faced together. The warmth of their bond radiated outward, enveloping them in a cocoon of light. "Let's show it!" Tommy shouted, his voice filled with newfound courage. In an instant, the light intensified, and the shadows began to dissipate, swirling away like smoke in the wind. The creature staggered back, its form flickering as it struggled against the power of their friendship. "No! This cannot be," it screeched, its voice filled with rage and desperation. Tommy and Lily stood firm, their hands still joined. "We are not afraid," they declared in unison. "Our friendship is stronger than any darkness." With a final surge of determination, they concentrated all their energy on the glowing key atop the pedestal. The key responded, glowing brighter than ever before, illuminating the entire chamber with a radiant light that banished the shadows once and for all. The creature howled in agony as the light enveloped it, breaking its hold over the maze. With one final flash, the creature disintegrated into shimmering dust, leaving only a warm glow in its wake. As the dust settled, Tommy and Lily released their grip and looked around. The grand chamber was now filled with light, and the oppressive shadows had vanished completely. They had triumphed. "You did it!" Tommy exclaimed, a grin spreading across his face. "We did it!" Lily laughed, tears of joy glimmering in her eyes. "We believed in each other, and that's what made us strong." They turned toward the pedestal, where the radiant key was now pulsating softly, inviting them to take it. With a sense of reverence, Tommy approached and grasped the key. The moment he touched it, a wave of warmth washed over him, filling him with happiness and a sense of accomplishment. As they stood together, the maze around them transformed. The walls shimmered and shifted, revealing a beautiful garden filled with colorful flowers, chirping birds, and a bright blue sky above. It was a place of peace and joy, a stark contrast to the dark maze they had just conquered. Look at this place! Lily gasped, her eyes sparkling with wonder. It's incredible. Yeah, Tommy said, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. And it's ours. With the key in hand, they walked together through the garden, the path ahead clear and bright. They knew they had not only proven themselves but had also discovered the true magic of friendship, a bond that could overcome any challenge. As they stepped into the sunlight, they were filled with hope and joy, ready for whatever adventures awaited them beyond the garden. They had faced their fears, triumphed over darkness, and discovered the true strength that lay within their friendship.
Whispering